Ja, dus...
Dan is nu opeens is de stemming kapot.
We zijn live.
Ja,
Oh my god.
3, 2, 1. Welkom bij...
Diversity stories. Nou, zeg ik heel raar, hè?
Ja, ik vind het heel leuk, maar tegelijk...
stories.
Oké.
Nou, diversity stories. Wij zijn...
Silas.
Nina.
En Pelumi.
Welkom bij de allereerste aflevering van Diversity Stories.
Hi.
Hoi.
Hey.
Ja, wat is Diversity Stories eigenlijk?
Dat is een podcast, dus dat is vrij logisch, want dat luister je nu naar. Misschien heb je dat ook via een of de andere podcast-app of iTunes weet het bemachtigen. Dus het is een podcast, dat klopt in ieder
Of
geval.
via de website van Studium Generale.
Maar waar gaat het over?
Oh ja, het gaat over diversiteit.
In alles.
Vanuit een
kunst.
studentenperspectief, want wij zijn studenten van ArtEZ.
Met persoonlijke verhalen over onder andere gender, identiteit. We hebben zelfs een menstruatieopera volgens mij.
Ja, maar die is niet in deze aflevering.
Nee, niet
dus
in
als
deze
je voor de
aflevering.
menstruatieopera komt, moet je nog even wachten.
Ja, blijf luisteren.
Aflevering 4.
In deze aflevering?
Hebben we 2 items.
Het eerste gaat over cultural appropriation.
En de tweede is een column die heet Nobody Cares.
Ja, en dat is een terugkomende
Column.
item.
En die gaat in dit geval over food.
Voedsel.
Voedsel.
Maar nu eerst het eerste item.
Over cultural appropriation en dan vooral in de mode.
Wat betekent precies cultural appropriation? Ik kan het mij wel voorstellen trouwens, maar voordat ik het verkeerd heb.
Wat dan?
Wat ik denk is het dus zich cultuur eigen maken op een bepaalde manier.
Ja.
Ja, ik denk dat ze dat gaan uitleggen.
Wat precies het inhoudt. Oké, nou.
En wat het voor hen betekent binnen de mode.
En wie zijn hun?
Het zijn Hester Brands, Chet Buchter en Chinook Vliek de Miranda.
Nou, gaan we luisteren.
Hi, my name is Hester Brands.
Hi, my name is Chet Buchter,
Hi, my name is Chinook Vliek de Miranda.
and as 3 students of the MA Fashion Strategy, Generation 26 and Generation 27, we are constantly challenged to pose questions towards the fashion system, which includes the structure and content of our educational program. Now we would like to share our critical stance on the fashion education system, inspired by a recent article on ID.com regarding the diversity and inclusivity of Dutch fashion schools.
Okay, so I don't know about most fashion education schools, but mine definitely stimulated students to search for inspiration outside of their own cultural domain, which for most entailed the West, without offering any substantial educational background on the source, meaning, and consequences of certain images and symbols. I assume that one of the reasons why this educational system is still in place is because a lot of famous Western fashion houses today have profited in one way or another from the use of non-Western cultural aspects. So this formula for fame and riches has therefore been proven quite worthy of itself. And I would like to give an example of a famous fashion house, so Yves Saint Laurent will be my example, who became famous for his references to other countries and cultures, such as India, Russia, Africa, and China. And paradoxically, without feeling the need to necessarily go there himself. And I quote, "I use my imagination to conjure up countries I don't know. I hate to travel. For example, I read a book about the Indies with photos, or about Egypt, where I've never been. My imagination takes me there. That's why I take the best trips." And this Yves Saint Laurent told himself in an interview with Catherine Deneuve, in an interview for Globe in 1986. So the thing that I'm talking about now is cultural appropriation. And what exactly is cultural appropriation? It is using other cultures and their subtle cultural nuances for the sake of profit, without necessarily crediting and or acknowledging the source. And I was wondering, like, do you have any examples of cultural appropriation, recent cultural appropriation that are in your mind right now?
Well, quite a few, I think. I think it's very widespread in our fashion system now. Like, I can remember that's a while back that there was a whole controversy regarding socks that were sold at Urban Outfitters with the picture of Ganesha, like the Hindu god, on them.
Yeah.
And that's the worst you can do for Hindu people. It's like complete and utter blasphemy to wear one of their gods on your feet. So without making sure that the producers and the designers of these socks apparently didn't know anything about the god they were putting on their product, or even the system in which this god usually exists. So that's, I think it can, like, sometimes cultural appropriation might seem sort of innocent and frivolous, but I think it can have very dire and
A dramatic
impact on certain communities or peoples.
I think it's a lot about people not knowing that they're actually appropriating a culture.
The unconscious aspect of it.
So it's like it's an innocent approach to something that has stronger repercussions for the person or the culture that they are appropriating. And I think that's where the fault lies, or like the intersection of if it's innocent or if it's meant like as if a brand
appreciation, basically.
Appreciation,
Yeah.
or maybe even capitalization, like
Right.
using it to sell stuff,
Yeah.
or using it to like style yourself in a trendy manner.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference, and it's kind of hard nowadays because everything gets overshadowed with the blasphemy of cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
Instead of
because of social media, like everything is directly, like everyone is digitally connected with each other. So whenever there's even the slightest hint of cultural appropriation, people over the whole world will instantly know about this.
Yeah.
And this is what my next part was going to be about, that designers are no longer protected behind thick media walls that were like in the time of Yves Saint Laurent specifically. And they are now, designers are digitally directly connected with the audience and therefore their consumers. So like through social media, the public pleads for inclusion and appreciation of their cultural codes in the fashion system. Minority cultures demand acknowledgement and awareness, and therefore challenge Western fashion culture to be more democratic in honoring cultural sensitivities. Designers must listen and respond, for they are now inherently part of the digital conversation.
Yeah.
So that means that also if a designer, for instance, like Marc Jacobs, who of course, with the dreadlock incident. If he didn't want to apologize at first for including these white models wearing these dreadlocks, and he was called out for that on social media, and Instagram really exploded with like discontent, basically. And
boycott. They were even talking about boycotting him, I think,
yes,
right?
they were.
I think so.
So if even like a white designer, wants to survive in this fashion system, he must actually listen to these minority cultures and act on it and change his behavior or her behavior.
But was it Gucci? Like the last fashion week, there was one
with the turbans.
Yeah, with the turbans. I don't know who
Yes.
Diane
was
Prada,
that?
probably.
No, that was Gucci.
That was Gucci.
Alessandro Michele from Gucci. Yes.
But then these brands, or especially the high-end brands, they keep doing it even though they are apologizing or semi-apologizing in order to kind of get
PR.
away with it, and then do it again, and then they do it again. So it's like a vicious circle.
And also maybe a PR a marketing stunt.
Well, yeah, probably.
It does create a sort of
Buzz.
media
A
storm
hype.
or a buzz
Yeah,
around your
like
brand.
Yes.
buzz around your
But I
brand.
think it's interesting when you talk about that brands keep on doing it. When I look at your what you wanted to say about this fragile balance between inspiration and appropriation,
Yes.
I think that's what's so sort of sensitive around this object, because that's
Yes.
how brands always market this approach to design, always by inspiration. And I think that's also the way in which they sort of still get away with it.
That's right. So, like linking to this, I wanted to talk about, yes, that this balance between inspiration versus cultural appropriation is a really fragile one, and that a lot of designers actually feel that appropriation can be a force for good, creating a cultural exchange and enriching the available vocabulary for designers, artists and image makers, even for chefs or filmmakers and architects. So it isn't, cultural appropriation isn't only specifically for the fashion industry. It's in all disciplines. It can be an engine that drives culture forward and breaks down borders and divisions rather than dividing them. And this was a quote by writer and editor Osman Ahmed, who published an article in the Business of Fashion about cultural appropriation being actually well-intentioned, or the possibility of cultural appropriation to be well-intentioned. And Ahmed got a lot of backlash for that, actually. And because at the same time, Ahmed's theory of cultural exchange has for a long time played a big part in today's fashion education system, as well as my own also.
Yeah.
Because it was near the end of my studies that I realized through social media that what I had been doing in my design process at school could actually offend people, but I was never told this at school. And by doing so, I had unconsciously been keeping a racial power structure in place that had been at the root of our Western society for centuries. I mean, like since the start of colonial times.
Yeah.
And for me, at least, this was very problematic. And that's why I decided to go to do also this master's program to really understand more. Like, even after my bachelor, after 4 years of intensive working together with fashion, it was never, ever apparent to me or told, we were never told that this was actually a very intense and problematic thing inherent to the fashion industry.
Yeah.
But so when, from your point of view, when is cultural appropriation done right?
Yes, so this is very difficult, and I've tried to write an essay about it for our subject fashion theory, and basically in the conclusion I say that cultural appreciation, as opposed to appropriation, is a very difficult thing, and it really, if you want to appreciate one's culture, you have to work together with someone that lives in that certain culture. So it's basically has to do with
like co-designing.
Exactly, collaboration and respectful collaboration in that.
Yeah.
Because also with the Dapper Dan and Gucci case, where Gucci appropriated Dapper Dan. So Dapper Dan is actually a black designer who grew up in Harlem in the United States, and Gucci literally copied one of Dapper Dan's designs that he made in the 80s. And Gucci later apologized to Dapper Dan after, again, a lot of social media backlash, and now they are willing to work together with Dapper Dan, and they're paying for a new studio, and they're going to work with him on a new capsule collection. So that is more an example of cultural appreciation, but at the same time it's forced. Gucci had to, and for the sake of the brand, basically.
Yeah, but do you necessarily think it's a bad thing? I don't think it's... I understand that because it's forced, they didn't sort of choose to do it themselves, but I think that such a big brand as Gucci, I don't really mind that it's forced, because
Me neither, absolutely.
that even,
Better forced than not.
That's true. So that's what I find.
Yeah.
I think with these big brands, they have such a huge exemplary function to the whole fashion system, that even
They're
if
role
we,
models.
even if we force them to apologize and to work in this new way, I think that can really kickstart also changes in education, for example, or changes in the way in which we consume fashion.
I think that's also the mass effect like high fashion and cultural appropriation has on its followers, or like the fashion system, and then trickling down into the mainstream system. Because in the 90s, Dapper Dan was iconic. Like his designs were iconic, but a lot of people that saw the show and until they started to hear about the controversy of Gucci ripping off his designs, basically didn't know who Dapper Dan was.
Yes, he was
So it
relatively
was-
unknown.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it's kind of like, unless you're really into hip hop and rap and all that 90s
basically
Harlem.
the black community. Yes.
Yeah, the black community, or just the people like from New York, not even like hip hop lovers, and they knew who he was, but like the mainstream fashion industry didn't know. So with this forced collaboration, he also gets recognition because I'm not saying it's a good thing that they ripped him off, but it kind of ended up working in his favor, because he was bankrupt. Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. He didn't have any money anymore because they shot his studio down and everything.
Yes, because he also was ripping off or using
Yeah.
logos such as Louis Vuitton logos and Gucci logos for his own clothing line. Yes.
So it kind of had...
It was a tricky situation.
Yeah.
But then again, like, I'm glad that Gucci decided to go along with working with Dapper Dan, because, like, Dapper Dan it's still problematic because Dapper Dan is part of this minority culture, and that he is on the bottom of a power structure that keeps racism alive, basically. And that I'm glad that he gets, I'm really glad that he gets like free commercial, basically, because Gucci ripped him off.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, when I was doing research about Dapper Dan, that apparently, like, his store was obviously shut down because he got accused of ripping off big Western fashion houses like Louis Vuitton. But it was only for the sake of his own people, the black community, because the black community wasn't able to be part of this luxury lifestyle that was
because they wouldn't
only
sell to them.
available.
Yeah.
Exactly, it was
Boutique
only
wouldn't
available
sell.
for white people.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, Dapper Dan wanted to basically democratize luxury, and that was using these logos was a way of to bring like luxury to his people.
I'm just thinking, because the ultimate situation here would be for Gucci to voluntarily work together with people like Dapper Dan. Because
That's right.
do you feel like this is a sincere like collaboration?
Well, as I said, it's forced.
Yeah,
Yes.
but okay, a collaboration can be forced, but it can also result in something sincere, and then...
Absolutely.
But do you feel like this would be something they would do
Which would-
in the future?
yeah.
Like, would they keep doing this, or like...
I hope so. I just
Yeah.
really hope, because that's also what I wanted to say or end my piece with another example about collaboration. So the other example would be that Cardi Kloss, like most people will know her. She's a white model. She's very famous, and in this particular example, she's wearing a floor-length Native American headdress while in a bikini during a Victoria's Secret fashion show in 2012. And like obviously the headdress when the headdress is used in Native American context, the object, the item, is loaded with a lot of meaning.
Yeah.
And as soon as the item is placed in a Western context, on a white body in this case, and used by Western people, the headdress is deprived of its meaning and its emotional value. And all that is left, basically, is an aesthetic superficial copy or container, or even ghost, if you will, of the original object. And if the educational system or high fashion labels like Gucci would spend more time teaching or learning cultural studies apart from only Western art history, cultural appropriation wouldn't be as common. And only if these non-Western cultural codes are respected or honored through mutual participatory collaboration can there be a real and honest creativity, I feel.
But how much of it would be not knowing or not caring?
Well, this is a tricky thing. Like, I always say, like, ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
And but it's also not wanting to know for a large part of the white society anyway.
Yeah.
And this is also what I talked about in my essay, that like Gloria Becker, the professor in anthropology, she's a black professor, and she talks about what her experiences are as being a black professor, having a higher education, and how she works within this sort of basically white male dominated area of expertise. And she calls this, or not caring, or what was the other thing that you say?
Not
knowing.
Yeah, not knowing.
She calls this white innocence, and she says that this white innocence is a mostly unconscious thing, and has usually to do with our, specifically now, Dutch history of colonialization, and that these social tricks that we learned during this time still exist today in education, but also language, in relationships, in all layers of society. You can really find these really subtle
aggressions.
Yes, microaggressions, they are called, I think. Also. Yes.
She wrote a book about this called White Innocence, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
So she explains white innocence as being something that white people inherently have, because white people are part of this colonial history, and that it has also to do with not wanting to know about our history, like our aggressive, violent history, and therefore denying that history, and also therefore indirectly denying racism.
Yeah, but then you could also state that it's almost you almost can't blame someone when they've never been taught something.
Yes, and this is where education then comes in again.
Yeah, that's where I think fashion education, super, or in a very sincere way, can really contribute to changing this behavior. And even when we start in only the fashion world, I think then maybe it can even trickle up or trickle up to other cultural disciplines, and
horizontally trickling, spreading. Yes, and of course, it's not only education, and it's also very important to whenever you see or register a certain kind of behavior that has to do with racism or any other microaggression, just call it out. And education doesn't really have anything to do with that. You always have the ability to say to someone hey, I'm seeing this and I don't agree with what you're doing. but yes, I agree that also to keep into this educational theme, that education can be can play a really big role in changing the colonial mindset. Yes,
Big words.
yes. But it's really important to talk about, and also I don't think that. I think that the Western culture in itself has enough cultural codes to be creative.
True.
And it doesn't necessarily need non-Western.
Non-Western influence or something.
Yes,
But
other than that, when it's a collaboration.
okay, so what do you consider Western fashion? Because does that mean there can be no cultural appropriation within Western cultures?
I think this is a next level question. Also,
because I
this
was
is a really
thinking
good
about
question.
it, and then, for instance, within Europe,
Mm-hmm.
there can be like cultural appropriation within Europe, but we accept it more because I feel like we accept it more because it's closer to home. Like we wear stripes and a beret and red lipstick and say, "Oh no,
Stereotyping
we're
the
French."
Yes.
Oh, yeah, so that's a very easy. Like,
Yeah, but I
But
think
then you're
it is-
also talking about again this power structure that the white people aren't in the top of this power structure, so it is different, and we especially Westerns and Western society view the Western system as a really progressive and intelligent system in comparison to the non-West, basically.
Yeah.
And there is a professor, and he's called Edward Said, and I think he doesn't live anymore, but he wrote a book in 1978, I think, which is called Orientalism, and he talks about this divisional thinking, as in the West, or us, compared to the Occident, them, the East. And he talks about that this divisional thinking also has a lot to do with our colonial past. And maybe, if you're asking then what is Western history, I mean, colonialization is a big part of it. But then use the codes that are inherently part of the white colonialism, the people that were colonizing, instead of the people that were suppressed through the colonization. Okay. So, but this is difficult. This is a topic for discussion, because actually the definition of what Western culture is that it's multicultural.
Yeah.
And that there are all these different codes now mashed up into one. So this is also part of the.
Because you also have the north of Europe has a total different type of cultural aesthetic than the south.
Yeah.
And then you have, the east, that is also kind of being appropriated nowadays. But
Gosha Rubczynski,
yeah,
Vêtements.
So,
yes.
So that's also I wonder why fashion is not, or people are not raising as much, or
Trouble.
creating as much noise about it.
Yes.
Because
there is noise, but
but
not
compared
as much.
compared to, it kind of gets overshadowed by the obvious cultural appropriation.
Because I think this sort of appropriation within Europe doesn't necessarily feed this racial power structure, maybe, because it's still all appropriating from fellow white people.
Yes.
That might be I don't know.
And it's more like appropriation of the class system then, maybe, instead of
but still
race.
But still
it's appropriation. It is a form of appropriation.
Yeah.
Yes, agreed. Maybe also because of why there is less noise is that this is just, I'm assuming this is just me thinking out loud, basically. Yeah. Because of the Black Lives Matter movement in America, that people are really now into this minority racial like problems or
Yeah, I think it's also
problematics?
I think it also has a lot to do with the fact that being proud of your individuality is now kind of on trend. So it's cool to be different, and as a lot of especially here in the Netherlands, like we have a lot of different cultures crossing each other.
Yeah.
Especially in the west part. So people are more embracive of their cultural differences as it makes them more of an individual.
Yeah, but also maybe because it's possible for them now, they feel to do so. Because before it was not okay to be different, and was not okay to be not part of the, like, Dutch cultural...
It wasn't embraced as much, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think the embracing of individuality also brings this awareness towards cultural appropriation.
Yes. So to put an end to this discussion, I would like to make a statement actually, and my statement will be that I think that you can only be as creative as your boundaries, or that you can be creative because there are boundaries.
That was nice.
Thank you.
Dit item werd gemaakt door Hester Brands, Chet Buchter en Chinook Vlikte en Miranda. En dat was het eerste deel van de ronde tafelgesprekken die zij voeren. Voor meerdere delen moet je blijven luisteren. Daar komen in latere episodes nog meer gesprekken.
Nou, dat ging dus over culturele toe-eigening in de mode.
En dan gaan we nu door naar
Voedsel. Eten.
van onze vaste column Nobody Cares.
Ja, dat is ook eigenlijk een soort culturele toe-eigening, zeg je dat? Bij het voedsel, hè? Of,
Ja, hoezo?
Nou ja, ik bedoel, we nemen dat voedsel van verschillende culturen over en maken daar ons eigen voedsel van. Of wat vind jij het lekkerst? Welk gerecht?
Ik hou van pasta.
Ja, ik hou van heel veel verschillend eten.
Je houdt van spicy.
Ja, ik
Toch?
hou van pittig eten.
Pittig, dat stoort.
Maar ja, vaak, inderdaad wat je zegt, vaak komt het ook wel direct uit, kan je zeggen van... Nee, ik bijvoorbeeld hou wel van Thais heel erg. Ja, dat is natuurlijk... Is het dan een toe-eigening van een cultuur, als je dat doet?
Misschien als jij zegt, ik ben de expert op het gebied van Thais eten.
Nou,
Want-
dat ben ik zeker niet.
Ja. Maar stel dat je dat zou zeggen, misschien dan wel. Ik weet niet of je het nu bent, het ligt heel erg aan wie je het vraagt.
En ik denk dat Azu en Zahide daar hele zinnige dingen over te zeggen.
In het volgende item, Nobody Cares.
Dankjewel, Pelumi.
Nobody Cares wordt gemaakt door 2 Turkse expats die bij elkaar komen als moderne Stadler en Waldorf om te klagen over...
Eigenlijk alles een beetje.
En in deze aflevering dus over voedsel.
Jajiki is not a sauce. I will have it tattooed on my forehead if necessary.
Nobody cares. The meat is so tasteless, I am about to turn vegetarian.
Nobody cares.
We are stuck on a piece of rock hurtling through space at 1,000 miles per hour, with a finite shelf life full of uncertainties.
Join us as we complain our way through the dizziness towards a modicum of joy. As we were still discussing the latest Adnan Hoca scandal, they just launched a rocket to Mars or what? For the people who might be interested in one and only Islamic cult with kittens, you can watch the documentary of Wise, linked in the show notes.
Do you mean like that, what's his face, Elon Muskrat? I mean, if you do, his only concern is how to leech whatever resources Mars can offer after he's done sucking up the very marrow of the Earth.
Oh, I never thought of him highly in that manner. I mean, the Earth is over, let's taste Mars.
Oh, could I mayhaps find even cheaper labor on Mars? Would I be able to nullify my taxes if I were to relocate my company headquarters to Mars?
I'm really not impressed at all. It's just, sheer greed coupled with near unimaginable levels of wealth. We're just talking about a guy who recently sold flamethrowers.
Yeah.
Flamethrowers also. Flamethrowers.
True.
And come on. And I mean, what you're doing here, like in the Netherlands, building up a new life from scratch, I find that like way more impressive, because there is no such wealth in the world. If I had that kind of money, I mean, I could just, I wouldn't send a car, but like a couple of donators to Mars.
I can't suffer an apocalypse or whatever now. And if our dystopias are going to become real, can they at least just let us know beforehand so we can time ourselves?
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah, you know what China Miéville says? My hero.
Yeah, what?
So it's not as if the world has not long been one in which vast numbers live in dystopian depredation. The horizon is more visible now to many who had thought themselves insulated, if they thought about it at all. So it's so apt, I can't even ask,
Yeah.
So dystopia for some is utopia for others, and we all actually live in a utopia, it just isn't ours.
So true. But like, yes, that was another interesting point. You said, like, speaking of dürüm.
I'm going to go back to dürums.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm hungry. And sending Mars to döner dürums is an amazing idea, I have to say. I'm hungry. The only thing I miss besides friends and family here is food. What I mean by food is like proper, delicious, familiar Turkish food.
Oh, yeah.
And its absence is sometimes so unbearable, and caciki is not a sauce. Caciki, I'm repeating again, caciki is not a sauce. I would have it tattooed on my forehead if necessary.
Yeah. And there really is an overabundance of sauces in Germany. I mean, it's nice to have some every once in a while, but
Are they really abusing it like they do here in Netherlands?
yeah, pretty much. The simplest, homiest dish I can get here is probably Dampfnudeln mit Kartoffelsuppe, and everything else is supposed to be drenched in sauce. Like, which it wouldn't even be necessary if the produce and meat had a little bit more taste,
Don't I know that? No. And what do you think about the absence of parsley and diamond-valued lemon? People, please, you cannot put coriander on everything.
Oh, God.
We have parsley as an alternative option. And the more you use it, the better it tastes, unlike coriander. And lemon is not something you skimp on. I mean, really, it really adds delicacy to the salads, and it's not the same as lime. And lahmacun is supposed to be eaten with lemon and some greens, preferably with onion. Not feta, not ketchup, or garlic sauce.
Oh, ew. I miss the smaller leaved parsley so much. My mother-in-law started growing it in pots. And I don't like coriander either, but it's not that dire a problem in Germany. Like, you can just say, please, without the coriander, can I please have it without the coriander? And they do that. They're nice that way.
Not really, but yeah, let's say yes. And yes, the size matters. I mean, what about those giant cucumbers?
Water. They're full of water. They taste just like water. And also most of the tomatoes here. Did I mention that we also grow our own tomatoes in summer? Right in the garden.
Wait, did you say summer? Like, which summer? You mean a couple of sunny and nice days? Where are those 3 months long summers we are all used to?
Yeah, it feels that way to me too. But it might also be caused by the house we live in here, where one can enjoy the sunlight best in the upstairs bathroom. No. Up, like, I mean, I see the house, by the way. Like, it's so, we live in the basement. It, opens directly to the backyard, and then...
the backyard doesn't have a sun. Brilliant.
Nah. So the house has its back to the sun. It's completely brilliant. I can't really describe it. One has to see it for themselves, though. So it's just amazing. Anyway, speaking of hot and cold, do people deep freeze as much in the Netherlands? I mean, in the 3 years I lived here, I have not shelled peas once.
Yes. If it's not frozen, it's not convenient. I too really miss the freshness of the fresh vegetables, although they look perfect on the stands here in the markets. And it's really confusing. It looks like a duck, walks like a duck. Unfortunately, it's not a duck. And as a result, even if you cook at home, it will never taste the same.
I mean, there are, of course, Turkish supermarkets where one might find some fresher or tastier produce. But those are also like incredibly dated. The Turkish supermarkets themselves, I mean, the places in terms of both appearance and content.
Yes.
I still remember the day I found a row of expired preserved braised meat, notified the shopkeepers, and like saw in horror how they didn't even remove them from the shelf.
It always has a distinctive smell, no? Like something is rotten and horrible. I mean, those horrible lightnings, like white, fluorescent, weird brands, or exactly the same brands they have it in here, but in Turkish packaging. I mean, like washing machine detergents. Obviously, Ariel is the same Ariel here. So why would you search for the Turkified version? Like, why?
Yeah, same here. Plus some Turkish brands I never even heard of in Turkey and would probably never buy if I had access to premium Turkish brands. But they do have the proper tea bags though, so there's that.
I hate tea bags. I hate tea bags. Do you like them?
Yeah.
No. They have nothing to do with the actual tea in terms of taste, don't you think? Like, and plus, making tea is not pouring some hot water on something. It's a ritual. It takes time. It needs attention.
Well, I think you sound a bit aristocratic there for starters, and well, I kind of gave up on rituals. My current lifestyle doesn't really support them. So I do use the tea bag tea.
So sad.
but also the German understanding of tea is worlds apart from the Turkish way. In that you are right. In that you are correct. Doesn't matter the copious amounts of that green tea they keep chugging. But we have different ideas about tea. Let's leave it at that. What's the spice situation in the Netherlands?
Whoa. Spices. Don't even go there. Like, once I remember for an assignment at school, I cooked a weird blue dish, and it was supposed to suppress the appetite because it was blue. Well, in 5 minutes, it was all gone, and people were asking for more. And one classmate say that the power of Turkish or Mediterranean cuisine lies behind the talent and the meticulous use of spice.
Yeah.
Which I agree, yes.
Okay. The Germans I met so far are interested in the idea of spices, but they're not really experimenting much or going out of their comfort zones. Yeah. Like, half a pinch of chili powder is like well seasoned, but a full pinch is like, oh, my stomach hurts. That was a bit too much spice, I guess. Oh. And it could also be like I am mostly in contact with older people, and the German Turks. I don't even want to go there.
No. I'm mostly bothered by the fact that nothing ever tastes the same as home. I'm referring to the food in the Turkish restaurants, by the way, here, and. You use the same recipe, same spices, high quality ingredients, etc., etc. But it's not the same, and even high in quality. I mean, when you compare it to Turkey, like, so can we say the main problem with Turkish people living in Europe is a missing gusto or what?
Do you mean it's like tied up with the identity of the Turks who built up those first Turkish communities here? Yeah, I mean, that's what I meant earlier. Germany's guest worker standards gave no priority to level of education, language skills, or anything of the sort. They were just interested in strong bodies they could hire for cheap and probably send back later, at an unspecified date. Which we both know didn't work out in many distinct ways.
True.
So those people they picked out from deep Anatolia, just by checking their teeth or whatever.
No.
That's well documented. I'm not making that part up, by the way. So those people were like so low on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They had neither the time nor energy for them to reach a level that would allow or facilitate their developing a good. They had way more immediate needs.
True. And let me add that their integration and hence an integration of Turkish culture to German culture was also not on Germany's to-do list back then, no?
Yeah.
Here it might be more related to the effort of making everything Dutch, like the tulips, the China porcelains, and like familiar to them, which in this case I'm so sorry to say tasteless. I'm really sorry, tasteless, or mask behind sauces. I believe Dutch people would appreciate the original taste more, Turkish chaos, and please stop offering feta and knoflook and tzatziki with lahmacun and döner. Please, they taste better without them, really.
I guess that sounds somewhat like what an actual person from China would think of our favorite little Chinese restaurant in Istanbul. Don't you think?
Oh God, wait, that you're right. But I think it's still tasty what they sell as Chinese food in Istanbul, no? Or maybe it's not to the Chinese people outside. Oh my God, it's so complicated.
I mean, China is gigantic, and in some ways as far as Mars for us.
True.
One could even think of each region as a separate continent, but who decides what's authentic? It's surely not us.
Do you think it will be simpler in the future, uniformed as well? What do you think is the future of food? Are we going to take pills, or are we going to eat weird green jelly with pink dots tiny portioned futuristic fusion dishes?
Did we ever talk about that burger patty they made from human feces?
What? What? I will bet on pills, and I will be immortal, and I have to cook. Really? It doesn't really make sense, no.
Yeah, but Kanka, immortality is for Elon Muskrats of the world. You and I will unfortunately eat whatever we can afford and die when we can no longer afford it.
No. Who am I to demand immortality? Who am I? This is also Aksu, up-and-coming complaint master of Arnhem and sought-out troubleshooter.
This is Zaida Fürstenberger, she who is doomed to weird names and the resident crone of southern Germany.
Signing off until our next anxiety attack or whatever.
Nobody cares.
Dus dat was ons laatste item van deze aflevering. Nobody cares.
Yes.
Food, glorious food, heet het.
Ja, en de Diversity Stories is een podcast die een initiatief is van Studium Generale ArtEZ.
Yes. Hierna komen nog 5 afleveringen. Voor deze aflevering speciale dank aan Hester Brands, Chet Buchter, Chinook Fliek de Miranda, Asu Aksu en Zahide Fürstenberger.
Voor meer informatie, kijk in de show notes.
Doei.
Tot de volgende keer.
Dag.
Wij zijn
Silas.
Pelumi.
en Nina.
Hold on. Tell you what's next. Hold on. Wait a minute.